the directive that I was told. There are trash baskets and baskets to scrape your food and a bucket for all of the compostables. They are over there. They are separate. They are clearly labeled. Please do this for me today, because I'm Sergeant at Arms, so I'm now responsible for all of you. If the wrong things end up in the wrong bucket, people are going to come yell at me. The other thing that I was directed to tell you is to please, this one time, silence or turn off your cell phones. Again, you can leave them on as loud as possible at every other Rotary meeting, but if they go off, I'm going to get yelled at this time. So. Do we have any guests today? We have several. I saw you first. Lily. Denise.
It's our way of getting your
Lisa from Extraordinary Adventures. Linda stood up, so. A brand new friend, congratulations.
Yes, so Jeff is a fellow Rotarian from Athens, Georgia. He and his wife and family are moving up to Chapel Hill, and she will be at UNC.
Awesome.
And he is checking us out. For worst behavior. He was president.
Jeff from Athens, Georgia. Multiple people over there.
I'm happy to have my friend Jackie Phillips graduated from Holden.
Where you been?
Happy birthday! Aaron? Someone has gotten the memo and stood up in the back. It's our win. Take credit for it. Go for it. Any other guests? I saw no other hands. Any visiting Rotarians today? Yes, and Jeff, again. This is how to get a second round of applause. All right, well, before we bring President Felix up and then to introduce Holden Thorpe, I have a story to tell that is ultimately going to end up being about Holden Thorpe, but bear with me as I work my way around to it. It's pretty common. Can everyone hear me in the back, by the way? Cool? Okay. I can actually project pretty well without the mic, but it's pretty common. I'm sure a lot of us in this room have had the experience of getting out of school, whether it's high school, college, grad school, however far up the chain we got, and going into the working world thinking for sure we're going to have this job and we're going to pursue this career, and then 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, we turn around and we realize that our careers ended up going in a completely different direction than we expected, right? A lot of us have had that experience. I've had that experience several times. For a few months back in second grade, I really believed that I wanted to be a bartender when I grew up. This is true. A lot of times at that age, kids will get words confused. I was 7. I had the word bartender confused with the word bachelor. So for 3 months in second grade, when people asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I told them I wanted to be a bachelor. I hung out for a while in that dream. We had to do this project for school, what you want to be when you grow up, with like a visual aid. People would bring them in, the teacher would hang them up around the room. So for about a month afterwards, all the way around the room was baseball player, astronaut, lawyer, doctor, and right in the middle was bachelor, with a picture of a guy pouring drinks. And that is a true story. Of course, now if you know me, you know my job is in radio and journalism. That was also not the plan. I have no radio experience other than what I do now. I never took a journalism class in my life. My background is in academia. I have a PhD. I was going to be a professor. At some point in 2010, I made a conscious decision that working in local news journalism on the radio was a more viable profession than college teaching. regrets about that already. But what actually got me into radio was comedy. Some of you may remember this far back, 2009, 2010. I was doing improv at the BSI Comedy Theater when they were open, and they did a comedy bit every day on WCHR radio that was called DSI Witness News, which was Saturday Night Live Weekend Update, but local. All local headlines, local character bits, characters based on local notables. And I started writing for it, performing for it, got to be the head writer for it. Eventually, I was looking for work. I'd fallen in love with the area. Someone said, oh, you do fake news really well. Real news can't be that much different. So I was doing funny bits about public figures, and then suddenly I'm covering them for real. And this creates some very interesting relationships with people who primarily knew me as the funny comedy guy. Because some pretty high-level people were big fans of DSI Witness News. Among them were Holden and Patty Thorpe. I think Patty more than Holden, but both of you together. And I looked this up. It was 15 years ago to the day, March 13th, 2011. I'm in Greensboro covering the ACC tournament final. Carolina Duke, we lost, but whatever. Game's about to start. I'm sitting in press row. It's really cool in the Greensboro Coliseum. If you're in press row, we get all the best seats. I've got all my notes, my laptop's up, I'm ready to go. Dick Vitale is sitting as far away from me as Felix is right now. All of a sudden, I feel this weird, icy chill down the back of my neck, and I have no idea what it is. I reach behind me, and it's a giant ice cube that's just going down my shirt. I look up, and there standing behind me is Patty Thorpe with a soda cup in one hand and the most delightful grin on her face. But this is a story about Holden, and this is also true. Holden and Patty were big fans of DSI Witness News, and I remember them saying, and again, I think more Patty, but both of them, that they were always just a little bit disappointed that I never created a fun character for Holden Thorpe. And this is my mea culpa 17 years later, because in 2003, I was in grad school, I was at Rutgers. We had a new university president, Richard McCormick. Dick McCormick made the news in a very odd way when he wrote an editorial about how a couple of kids had tried to mug him on his way out of a liquor store. This created some talk about crime in the area, which was the point, but just for fun, I was in grad school, just among my friends, I wrote a parody of that editorial wherein McCormick had gotten all big-headed and chest-thumpy about how he single-handedly fought off multiple assailants while toting a keg on his shoulder the entire time, and publicly proclaiming himself to be the protector of New Brunswick, New Jersey, and declaring himself to be Dick McCormick, the flying fist of justice. Fast forward to Chapel Hill, I'm writing for DSI Witness News, and I want to resurrect that character for the leader of UNC, but I had just gotten to Chapel Hill. I'd moved down from Jersey. I didn't understand the whole UNC system governance thing, and I mistakenly assumed that the president of UNC was the head guy in Chapel Hill. So that was Erskine Bowles at the time. So for DSI Witness News, Erskine Bowles became the flying fist of justice, and that was a really fun recurring character for about a year and a half. But I want to take this opportunity to finally, formally, officially apologize and say, Holden, I was wrong. The true flying fist of justice was always you. And with that, I want to bring in President Felix.
Thank you, Aaron. Good afternoon, my fellow Rotarians and our guests. You've seen and heard that our good friend, our fellow Rotarian, Dr. Frank Menis, passed away. And even when he continued to fight his illness, he continued to attend our meetings. And that tells a lot on how much he was committed to what we do. So I would like us to take a moment to remember Frank. Thank you very much. His funeral service is on Saturday, March 21st at 2 p.m. at the University United Methodist Church. With that, we have a few announcements, starting with Mike Clayton.
Yeah, thank you, President Felix. I was talking to one of our members the other day on the phone, and he asked me what I was doing for lunch. I said, I'm going to go with the Tuesday lunch bunch. He said, I didn't think y'all were doing that anymore. Well, we are. For you new members, old members, we have an informal lunch on Tuesdays at Bradman's. Show up when you feel like it. If you're hungry, got nothing to do, come join us, make some new friends, meet some old friends. Okay?
Hey, thank you, Mike. We'll take you up on that. Appreciate it.
Noon, Tuesdays, Bradman's. We outgrow that, we'll go somewhere else. We've moved around a lot in the last 22 years, haven't we, Ed?
All right. What a good way to socialize and catch up. Last Saturday we had a very successful litter trash pickup day. A lot of people showed up. Vince, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you, Felix. Thanks to those of you that participated, and hopefully some of the rest of you will come on out and join us in the future. We had about 16 of us out walking the streets of Chapel Hill on last Saturday. Picked up about 25 bags of trash plus some carts and kind of cleaned up a couple of abandoned homes and camps. So they were really in bad shape. And anyway, thank you all. Fun was had by all, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah. The route that we took. Yeah, the route that we took with Brian and the rest. Brian, I know you're getting your food, but you got a comment when we were picking up litter. Can you share that comment?
There's so many comments to expand on it. But I will tell you one result. Our team went down. We lost Felix. He was supposed to be on the other side of the road with Judy. We went down, cleaning everything, and halfway down, they disappeared. So where they went to, Felix, you were supposed to continue picking the roof, by the way. So we had to re-trace and try desperately find you, picking up all the trash. In fact, I've got a few pieces I've got to bring them actually today to show you what we picked up behind you. So just one this time. You need a little more practice on this. And then what else I'd like to sorry, not something to talk about, but we went to Cookout, which is a disaster every year. We took photographs of what we had, picked up, trying to show it to the manager. He wasn't much interested. But anyway, I registered at Cookout headquarters, and they put in some trash cans. I went by it yesterday. It's making a difference. So not only what we did that day, but it seems as if we have a lasting impact.
Hey, Brian, okay. Brian, what about the comment you got from Whole Foods? Whole Foods. I can say it if you can't remember. I think they came to you and say, hey, yeah.
That's right. So, we have a very honourable president, because on the pavement, in Bingham, we found two gift cards. One is $100, and another one was something else. So, this could be a good tip for you. No, one we left on the pavement for someone else. And, we came up, followed behind you, and I took it in to Whole Foods, and I actually gave it to you, and I said thanks to you. So you've got credit over there.
Yeah. And also Whole Foods came to us and said, we've never seen anybody come to clean up our parking lot, and we usually pay people to come do it. So they were very, very appreciative of what we do. And with that, I am going to call upon Jim Hebner to introduce our guest.
Penny Hudson does a wonderful job with our biographies. And one of the reasons that we do that is so that we can tell you more about the speaker than you want to hear in person. So we're going to, and to keep it short, but she left out of the biography. Penny does a good job, but as senior to her, I would want to admonish her because she did not point out that Holden Thorpe, who has, as we all know, has cut a wide swath in the world, got his start as a musician at WCHL back in the early it's on the back. That's what I was going to try to talk to Holden today about my ADHD, but the problem was I forgot the question by the time he got to the answer. And we are all blessed. We have got a good crowd here today because we have a man who's going to teach us today and give us an opportunity to answer the questions about the whole notion of the spectrum. But at the same time, I think he is such a part of this community that it doesn't matter where he lives. And even though today he has in a lot of ways, if you believe that science is the key to the advancement of the human condition, then he is in a place where he can have an influence on the dialogue of the most important topic we can talk about to advance the human condition with his work as the CEO of the Science family of magazines. And as long as he may be honored in other places, he will always be back home because I see the number of people here today who want to come up and meet their longtime friend and his visit to his hometown, Holden Thorpe. Please give him a applause.
Thank you, Jim. Y'all hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, it's awesome to be back. Let me just say that, Jim, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to give the credit to Bill Baldwin because I joined Kyle Whitford's band, and we had a very simple business model. We played all the gigs that Bill Baldwin turned down. That's how I got into the Chapel Hill music scene. So it was only then that Kyle, who worked for you as a DJ, decided we would come play on your radio station every 2 weeks, but we had an awful lot of fun doing that. But I do appreciate it, both of you, helping me pay for college 40-some years ago. You paid me, yeah. Not, in retrospect, not a lot, but I thought it was a lot. So I guess that's a good thing. And I'm really excited to be, haven't come in this building. I knew Aziz was setting this up, but I was actually in Aziz's lab for about a month because I was going to get an MD PhD at UNC before I changed my mind and decided to go to Caltech and get a PhD in chemistry. So I've known Aziz this whole time also, and was really, really excited when he got the Nobel Prize, which of course was very well deserved, but they don't always give it to the people who deserve it the most. So it was really exciting to see that he had told me at the time that he was going to do this. So this is very cool. And I feel sheepish talking about autism with Lisa Haley here. If you all aren't familiar with what they're doing at Extraordinary Ventures, you should really check it out. And now they're running the former PTA thrift shop in Carrboro. And so I used to go there to buy outfits when I needed to do an impression. But I think Patty bought a lot of other stuff there. So I've been going around talking about this a lot. I talked about this in November at much greater length than I'm going to today. But I've spent the last 2.5 years or so trying to learn as much as I can about autism and all the challenges that we're facing in this country and around the world with this diagnosis. You're probably reading a lot of stuff about the autism epidemic and how many people have autism now, and disagreements over whether it's really just somebody's personality or whether it's a real scientific thing, and what we should do about it, and what causes it, and what cures it, and it's gotten to be quite one of the biggest topics we have in American discourse right now. And I got into it, kind of through my own story, like most people. When I was a kid, I learned to read when I was 2 years old. As you all know, I was a Rubik's Cube champion. I fixed all the projectors at my school. I fixed all the stuff at my mom's theater. She had fired me as an actor. It takes a lot to get fired by your mom when you're 12. But I was such a bad actor, and my brother was good at it, which made it worse. But I was fired as an actor when I was 12. But fortunately, there were lots of things at the theater for me to tinker with, and I enjoyed doing all that stuff. And I had a supportive family, and I had resources. And the fact that I was a goofball, probably might have gotten a diagnosis today, was easily manageable. I went to a small Catholic school where I had the same students with me for 9 years, and they took unbelievably good care of me. They did pick me last in kickball, but they were happy that I did stuff, and we still have a group chat together all these years later and get together every 2 years. So when you have friends like that, and you're not isolated online like a lot of kids are, I had a much better outcome than a lot of people with my profile might have had. And when I was a faculty member, I was hanging around with a lot of other people who had fixated interests and many other traits that made it very comfortable for me to interact with them. And so I had great people around me then, and playing music, music is a very specific interest of mine. And so, all of this stuff worked out fine. And then somehow, y'all know better than I do, I became the chancellor of UNC Chapel Hill, and suddenly had to do socialize with people who didn't share my fixated interests, and listen to their ideas about how to change the university, most of which were wrong. But I was supposed to pretend like they were right, and go to football games and cocktail parties and fraternity houses, and all of that was, I tried to hide it, but I think a lot of you noticed it, but there were a lot of nights at Quail Hill when I was lying under the bed, and there were a lot of times when I was overwhelmed at a function and I ran into the bathroom, and the only problem was Jim always followed me in. Because he always had one more question he had to ask me. The Chancellor. So I was always looking for a place to escape. And then I got myself in a situation where I had to process a lot of different streams of information. That's another thing that we're challenged with. I'm going to tell you about autistic strengths in a minute. But and so when I got out of here and went to WashU, I was in another very comfortable situation because I was working for a chancellor who understood me just like Erskine Bowles had understood me when I was here, and gave me a lot of support, and wanted me to run everything for him. And it's weird that autistic people a lot of times get put in charge of things, but we have a 5,000-year-old example of this, because in the book of Genesis, a lot of people think that the character Joseph might have been on the spectrum, because he told his brothers about this dream where he was going to dominate them, which was maybe not the most socially aware thing he could have done. And then he told them the next dream. So he was sort of failing at social communication, if you think about it. And so then they sold him into slavery, and he goes to work for this guy, takes one look at him and says, I'm putting you in charge of running my household. because he knew they were never going to run out of household supplies or everything was going to be operated perfectly. But then the guy's wife tries to seduce him. And, Joseph takes the ultimate high road because we're all rule followers. That ends up back in prison. And what does the prison warden do? Put him in charge of running the prison. Then he gets known for interpreting dreams. Then he goes to meet the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh puts him in charge of running Egypt. But the Pharaoh recognizes that he needs his unbridled support. And he even goes and finds him a neurotypical wife who can take Joseph to all the social functions and make up for his challenges. And, I identify with that story, as you might imagine. When I got to WashU, it was a very similar situation. I had somebody who supported me. I was in charge of running the place. He was off doing all the things, interacting with the external stakeholders. And I had a normal kind of, management review that you have when you're an executive that was done by a psychologist. And I was expecting her to tell me, these are some things you could do better. Here's some feedback from your coworkers. And I got a lot of positive feedback from my inside coworkers, but they all said, boy, Holden really seems like he's kind of in pain whenever we're at a social function. But she also got feedback from the trustees who weren't part of the university, and they were split right down the middle between the ones who said, man, I love it that Holden just gets right to the point, and we have so much confidence in him, and the other ones who said, when we have a cocktail party, Holden's staring at the wall the whole time. Sometimes I ask him stuff, and I don't really like the way he answers me, even though I figure it's probably correct what he's telling me. She told me she's a qualified psychologist in addition to being a coach, and she said, look, I usually don't do this when I'm coaching people, but I'm qualified to tell you, I'm pretty sure you're on the spectrum. I was confident she was right. I went home and called Patty, and she was her usual supportive self, but when I asked her again later, she said, yeah, I was surprised. I was really shocked that you were surprised by this. But at the time, I really didn't understand, what I knew about autism was, how could I be autistic when what I knew about autism was, children who have very high support needs, who are banging their head against the floor and who can't speak. And, Rain Man, he could talk, but I wasn't, I'm quite like Rain Man. I couldn't multiply large numbers together in my head and get the answer immediately. The repetitive speech I could kind of identify with. And so I just kind of decided to keep this to myself for a while because I really didn't understand how I was going to talk about this in a way that wasn't what I felt was disrespectful to people who were taking care of children with much, much greater needs. And so I started coming up with these ways of just telling people things like, well, look, I know I'm really hard to read. If you come to me and you're telling me something in my office, if you don't want me to, if you're just venting and you don't want me to fix what you're here to talk about, you need to tell me, because otherwise I'm going to write it down in my notebook and get out a piece of graph paper and figure out how to fix your problem. I learned to do things like this, and there were certain people that I connected with, especially when I got to science. There was somebody who had me figured out immediately. And said, I don't think you pick up on everything. I said, yeah, you might be right about that. So I had people that, could help me, and being aware of it was a big help. Eventually I met some people in the autism world who told me how to talk about people with high support needs and people with low support needs, and how we were all part of the autism spectrum, and that I could do this in a way that would mostly be embraced by even parents of children with very high support needs, and certainly by lots of autistic people who don't have an intellectual disability, who talk about their autism, and how it's important for people like me who are in their 60s, who are financially secure, are in their last job, have done all these things to disclose our diagnosis so that it makes it safer for people who don't have all those things, who don't have as many resources or opportunities that I have. And again, I feel strongly that if I'd come along today and I'd had a little more trauma in my life and a little less support from my friends and family and had been isolated online like young people are today, that I could have had a very different outcome. And so I started talking about this, and the response to it was much more positive than I expected. Again, I had a lot of risk. I told my boss about this before I went out and did it. And then as it kind of built, I started trying to learn a whole lot more about this. And the kinds of things that I like to tell people who are scratching their head about this is that, I mean, one of the huge conflicts we have is between these folks who are parents of mostly of children and adults who have very, very high support needs, and people on my end of the spectrum who, in my opinion, I don't agree with them for doing this all the time, but who feel very strongly that autism is all one thing, that it's all one disease, we all have the same one, and that their voice is equivalent to the voice that you would get from somebody with high support needs if they could speak for themselves. And this creates a lot of tension in the autism community. I tend to be in the camp that says, you know, I do want more awareness of autism. I do want people to, we'll get to accommodate and universal design in a minute. At least I can tell us a lot more about that. But I do want people to accept some of our traits. I don't, whether somebody makes eye contact with you or not should not be a way in which you judge anything about them. But yet, that is, we have research that shows that is a huge determinant of how people who are not on the spectrum make evaluations of autistic people. So I identify with a lot of what the left, if you want to call it, the neurodiversity rights side would believe, but I also think if somebody is making the kinds of sacrifices that people who are taking care of, you know, like Wayne Ball and Julian, I mean, he does such a great job writing about the way he's taking care of Julian and how much it means to him. Like, I have not made the same kind of sacrifices that Dwayne and Martina have made. And it's very important to me that I don't represent myself as having done that. But two things are true at the same time. One is that there are genetic differences between somebody like Julian Ballin and me, or even people who have even more challenges than he does. And so there's an argument that we shouldn't have it all in one disease, that we should break it all up. But it's also true that the neurological changes that occur are just smaller versions of the same thing all the way across the spectrum. And so the fact that now that autism is one of my fixated interests, I don't want to stop talking about it, is the same that neurologically as someone who's nonverbal, who's like repeating the same physical movement over and over again. Those are on a continuum. And so neither camp is completely correct in saying we should subsidize autism or that it's all one thing. You know, both of those things happen to be true. And a lot of the people who argue with each other about autism, this is the very thing that they're arguing about. To me, as a scientist who takes everything literally, that's not hard, because both of these things are true. But, you know, some of, you know, the nuanced world sees one of these as being more important than the other. And I learned a lot about this when I interviewed somebody named Carrie Cariello, who has a son, Jack, who had a speech delay, and when he left home, he had to go to a apartment complex where everybody there was autistic, and there was, you know, a lot of supervision and stuff. But he got his college degree, he's got a job. And I said to her, I said, Carrie, I mean, I get that I'm very different from Jack, and Jack has a modest intellectual disability. I said, I get that I'm very different from Jack, but, you know, she had written, Jack can't stop talking about airplanes. So Jack can't stop talking about airplanes, and I can't stop talking about autism or the history of jazz, or, you know, all these fixated interests that I have. And she said, yeah, there's a big difference. You're able to think about the fact that you're boring people. Even if you can't stop yourself. But Jack will never understand why people wouldn't always be interested in airplanes. And that really helped me understand that, you know, those of us who have zero intellectual disability, who can talk and think about our autism and make decisions about whether to try to mask it or not, even if we're not good at it, that's a privilege that not everybody on the spectrum has. Now, if you're curious whether you have any autistic traits, the answer is you do. There's a test called the Autism Quotient, which measures autistic traits that was developed by somebody that I've talked to a lot named Simon Baron-Cohen. And yes, he's Sacha Baron Cohen's cousin. They look kind of alike. But Simon is probably the most widely published author about autism. And he made a test called the Autism Quotient that measures autistic traits. And there are better ones. I mean, the clinicians use a much more sophisticated one, and there's even a better one online called the RADS test. But what the AQ has going for it has been given to millions of people. And when I asked Simon, I said, what's the biggest surprise about the AQ? He said, no one's ever gotten a 0. Right now it goes from 0 to 50. I got a 42. And I had Patty do it again just to make sure I wasn't getting the test somehow. You know, 30, if you're over 33 or so, then, you know, you might be on the spectrum. But having a lot of autistic traits is certainly not the same thing as being autistic. But everybody has some of these traits, right? And that's why this is so hard, because where your autistic traits become autism is a completely subjective decision. I mean, it's based on whether you feel you need support for your autistic traits. So if you ask Patty, she'll say, I definitely need support for my autistic traits. But there are, but that is a pretty subjective thing. And again, a lot of the tension in the autism community comes from this. Lorna Wing, who's the person who came up with Asperger's as a label, said that that Asperger's fades imperceptibly into eccentric normality, which is a great way of putting it. And what that means, and this is a big part of my work, is those of us in that area really have a choice about whether to seek a diagnosis or not. And part of what I'm doing is trying to do all this so that the people who have been told that they might be on the spectrum, or, you know, they're like me, people in the workplace have said something, or they're having trouble with their relationships that might be due to this, they can read my stuff and make their own decision about whether they want to get a diagnosis or not, or whether they want to disclose it. Because there's really no right answer in this area where a lot of us are. Now, the neurodiversity movement, which again is this idea that the world wasn't built for autistic people, and so we deserve a world that is prepared to accept us, and some people say accommodate. I say accommodate because it begins with an A, which you'll see why that's important. But people like those folks at Extraordinary Ventures call it universal design, because most of the things that you could do to make life better for autistic people, like not care about whether we make eye contact with you, or whether we're fidgeting when we're talking to you, or whether we're swaying back and forth when we're giving our talks, or staring at that logo out there, which I can't stop myself from staring at. Everybody has quirky things like this that they should be able to, that we should accommodate, because, you know, we care about what people are as humans, and, for example, in the workplace, we care about whether they get their work done. But all of these accommodations would make life better for everybody. I mean, autistic people really, really hate filling out complicated forms on the internet. we might end up curled up in a ball on the floor over it. But nobody likes filling out complicated forms on the internet. So why don't we just get rid of all of them for everybody? Yeah, or, giving people extra time on a test. Why do we give tests that it matters how fast you can do it? We want to know what you learned, not how fast you can tell us. Let's just give everybody more time on the test. That would solve all kinds of problems. And the neurodiversity movement, in addition to feeling that autistic people should not have to ask for accommodation, also has driven a lot of this. Now, I've spent a lot of time trying to understand, since I can use my experience to do this, leaders who have autistic traits. And there are a lot of people that you look at and say they are autistic or they might not be autistic, and we get caught up in this whole thing of, is Elon Musk on the spectrum, or is Martha Stewart on the spectrum, or is Boris Johnson on the, and that's all really a waste of time. Because everybody has some autistic traits, and if somebody's exhibiting autistic traits, then you can just talk about their traits. And whether you talk about whether they identify as autistic or not, that's up to them. And so we don't even really need to engage in this. And this happens a lot with historical figures, because, like I was saying with Joseph, well, he didn't get a diagnosis. Or a lot of people say Thomas Edison is on the spectrum. Probably, but we don't even have to really get bogged down in that. But certainly a lot of people who have accomplished a lot are people who have a lot of autistic traits. And again, I have no idea whether he's on the spectrum or not, or even care, but I would say this coach in Indiana who just won the football championship, he's not exactly Mr. Smooth. he makes facial expressions that nobody can interpret, and he's obsessed with all the details. And when the reporters ask him, questions, he gives such direct and, in my opinion, beautiful answers. And having been on the other side of this, I can understand why he ended up in Indiana, because sometimes the way you hire these coaches is very much based on their personality. But yet, somebody like him who's results-oriented figured out how to beat everybody. We'll see if he can keep doing it or not, but that's something he did this year. And so, you probably know the most, certainly the biggest writer about leadership today in the popular world is Brene Brown. And I tried to get her to talk to me, and she finally did. And when I talked to her, I explained what I was doing, and she said, I said, I'm really surprised you talked to me. You must get millions of requests. And she said, oh, I don't think anybody's working on what you're working on, and it's really important because I coach leaders around the world for a living, and I'm dealing with so many who have autistic traits who are struggling with them. But I believe that in today's world, they're the leaders we need, not the alpha dogs who are command and control, because there's so much uncertainty right now that people who take things literally and can be crisp and careful about what they say and who know how to analyze complicated systems, those are the people we need. And she and I had a long talk about that, and that'll be the finale of my book. But she's given me a lot of encouragement. And my, just to end so we can go to the questions, because Jim told me 1:40. So my model for this is a triangle. And it involves the three things that we've talked about. So at the top of the triangle, and they're all begin with the letter A. This is confusing because I work for an organization called the AAAS, which is the American Association for the Advancement of Science. But so I have another AAA thing in my life. And the top is alignment. And alignment is, and this is the hardest problem we have in autism, I believe, which is, and this is what Lisa deals with every single day when she brings people into her organization, and that is how much can somebody do the things that they want to do based on the traits that they have. And, you know, for me, that's, I'd rather not go to a crowded cocktail party, but I can easily go to, I can easily come here where I know almost everybody and I'm happy to talk to you. But for somebody else, you know, just going to the store might be overwhelming because of the senses and things that they have. And for other people, you know, they can do a lot of things, but they can't be, for example, you know, Temple Grandin always says, yeah, you don't want autistic people being a gift wrapper in a department store at Christmas time. Because you can get overwhelmed. Now, the good news is you can move the alignment over the course of your life. And that's through the other two A's. The next I call adaptation. That is, what things do I want to change and work on, and what new skills do I want to get to try to move my alignment a little more into some of the things that I want to do. And I can get that through great coaches, and I'm hoping one day we'll get that through technology, because there's so many autistic people now, and so many particularly young people who got diagnosed in school who are going to turn 18, that it's going to overwhelm the system. So thinking about how this happens without individual coaches is a very, very challenging and interesting problem. But definitely, there are lots of adaptations we can make. Some people call this masking, which is mostly criticizing the idea of making adaptations, but I think it's okay as long as we're masking, as long as we're adapting traits that matter. So adapting eye contact and fidgeting, I don't think we should have to do that, but getting better at social communication is something that we, I think is reasonable to try to work on, or for people with higher support needs, self-injurious behaviors and things like that. Then you have the third part of the triangle, which is accommodation, and that is people, the world understanding how to make a world for autistic people that gets rid of some of these challenges. And if you start going around this triangle, and you can go in either direction, then the alignment of autistic traits with what people want to do can improve. Some of those people might end up not getting a diagnosis ever because they're fulfilled in doing the things that they want to do. And many also may learn that they really do need a diagnosis and do need professional support. And my mission in life now is to get people to understand all of this, the ones who need it. And if we do, then it'll make the world better for everybody. Because not only do we need more, not only will the accommodations that get made be ones that make the world better for everyone, but we need autistic leaders in positions because A, we need other autistic people to be able to see themselves thriving in the world. But more importantly, we need the skills that autistic people, those of us who don't have an intellectual disability, have to be able to understand complicated systems, to be able to be results oriented. Leaders are supposed to do two things. One is the interpersonal part, and the other is the results part. But we almost always hire people solely based on the interpersonal part. And we really ought to just get rid of job interviews altogether when you think about it, because it really just matters whether somebody's getting their work done. Now, you don't want them to be actively disruptive and stuff like that. But, we put so much effort, and most of the leadership literature that comes out of business schools is all about people style. But that hasn't served us well, especially now with political turmoil and with AI coming on. We got a lot of challenges that require analytical thinking and great focus and a focus on results, which is what autistic people I think can do, whether they're somebody who works at a grocery store and never ever calls in sick or fails to show up for work, or whether it's coaching the national championship football team and and having the right play on every single play because you've analyzed every single piece of film and you told everybody precisely where they're supposed to be at precisely what time. Because, you know, there's a lot of vague instructions that happen in the workplace. And you're supposed to read the room and intuit these. But one of my mantras is we need to take the guesswork out of teamwork. Because, and again, everybody be better off with this. Because, and there's a guy at Vanderbilt named Tim Bogus, who's a leadership scholar, who studies high reliability organizations, and he finds that they're much safer when directions are explicit compared to when they have to be intuitive. So these are also things that we could get out of this. I'm really excited to be back. It's getting around town, but Patty and I are coming back. We bought a place over in Franklin Grove. I wanted to be Joe Jenkins' neighbor, but he left. So it's going to take us a year or so before we are moved in, but we're really excited. I'll be able to walk to your meetings from here on, Jim. So thanks for paying attention. I'll be happy to answer any questions. As far as the Smith Center is concerned, Chancellor Roberts has my complete support. You don't have to ask me. Yeah, definitely.
Maybe I can speak really loud.
Well, yeah, or just speaking to them. There are some people here.
Thank you so much for being here. I'll just quickly ask, as a parent of someone who's neurodivergent, who has been diagnosed with ADHD, how is science looking at this neurodevelopment spectrum in what now I'm hearing called the ADHD diagnosis?
So that's a great question. People ask me about ADHD a lot. Autism's a big topic, so I'm mostly just trying to focus on that. But some things that are really evident about all that. First of all, there's a lot of ADHD in the siblings of autistic people, right? So there's a lot of genes in common, and a lot of people, don't know this about my brother, but he kind of had to repeat the first grade, and if there was an ADHD diagnosis in 1960, whatever that was, he would have almost certainly got an ADHD diagnosis. And, he went to Harvard and became a rich venture capitalist, so I think he managed to push past that. And science is definitely studying ADHD as much as autism. But the question you're asking is, can autism and ADHD go together? And the answer is yes. I mean, you can look at the genes that the whole genome of autistic people, and you can see what else clusters with them. And so a lot of autistic people have anxiety. That's probably not too surprising. PTSD, but lots of other things. And ADHD is one that clusters very easily, very frequently with autism. So there are a lot of people talking about how autism and ADHD go together. But one of the frontiers in autism research, for sure, there's ADHD or depression, anxiety, PTSD, lots of other things, is understanding the comorbidities that go along with autism. Because, of course, if you're autistic and you're not processing, social cues on top of your anxiety, that's probably making it worse. And there's a lot of interest on, if you treat the anxiety, then does that make the autism symptoms better? Most of the time, I think it does. Yeah.
The reason I'm calling is that, or asking you a question is that I rarely do this, but I have a sister-in-law who has a child that is in your spectrum, but much worse. So I'm wondering, he cannot do anything. He cannot attend anything. He cannot be with anybody. He just has got to do what he does.
Yeah.
Is there any hope for somebody that has that depth of problem?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's certainly a lot of research focused on that, and it's controversial within the autism world. I don't agree with it, but there are some people who think that we shouldn't try to correct autism, but I think in cases like the one you described, the research, it's very far off from anything, but I think, I'm very supportive of the people who are working on that, and I'm constantly trying to get some of the people on my end of the spectrum who don't get that to understand that by explaining more of the science to them. The hope for someone like your nephew, yeah, and thank God he's got you and your sister to look after him, because the support is the most important thing. Most cases of very profound autism, like you're talking about, are caused by a different kind of mutation than the ones that people like I have. So on my end of the spectrum, we have what's called the common variants, and these are genes that all of us have to some extent, and sometimes they come together in patterns that lead to a particular phenotype behavior like we have. In the cases of profound autism, those are generally caused by individual mutations that are either inherited or more often happen in the genome of mom or dad before, in between when they were born and when the baby was conceived. And the good news about that is that if you're looking for a way to change it, that you might only have to change one gene. To do gene therapy on somebody who has 1,000 mutations that cause their behavior, that's never ever going to happen. But what we might call a rare disease that is caused by one mutation, it's possible that one day we'll have gene therapy for that. Now the problem is, once the brain is developed, we really don't know what happens if we take that mutation and reverse it. But as far as gene therapy is concerned, some of you may have followed the story of baby KJ Muldoon, which is our baby who's had germline gene therapy that survived the longest. I think she made it something like 6 months or something like that. And so she had a disease that would have killed her even faster than that, which is why that experiment could be done. So I think, we will have gene therapy one day, and there will be a small number of profound autism cases where there might be a single gene that you could correct. And whether that's exactly what that's gonna do or not, we've got a long way to go from that. But if you want to hear more about that, you have one of the best people working on that here, Joe Goodman, and you could have him come talk to you, and he'd be much more knowledgeable than I am.
RFK Jr. and vaccine.
Yeah?
Comments?
Yes. Do I have any comments about RFK Jr. and vaccines? Well, there's absolutely no evidence that vaccines cause autism, and there was no evidence that leucovorin was a cure for autism. That the main leucovorin paper they were relying on has now been retracted. So that they're playing very fast and loose with the evidence, I would say, and I think it's becoming politically unpopular. I mean, a lot of things have been walked back in the last month or two that they were pushing. So I think the good news there is that that's happening because there's midterms coming up and the Republicans want to try to win. And if this vaccine thing is politically unpopular, then that may walk back. But I would say, and I've talked to a lot of moms who, not a lot, but I was on a podcast called Why Should I Trust You? And it was me and another sort of medical establishment person, and two moms who were convinced that their children became autistic because of the MMR vaccine. And anybody who thinks that the right thing to do is to tell that mom, like all the randomized control trials that show why she's wrong, isn't very understanding of how human beings work. So I think, RFK knows better, and I'm fine yelling at him. But these moms, I mean, they'll describe they thought their baby was fine. They took the baby to get the MMR vaccine, and when they brought him home, he was changed. Now, we can explain why that was just a coincidence and how that couldn't possibly be right. But if you're that mom and that's your experience, and you've got a political infrastructure that is reinforcing that, then I think we have to be extremely compassionate about the people who believe that. So it's like every other political problem. You have to separate the politicians who know better from the people that are having real experiences. So I'm certain we're not going to climb out of this by ridiculing the people who believe that vaccines cause autism. Because ultimately, you know, they need to trust us, and we need to bring them around, and we're not going to do it by warfare. You know.
Thank you for your.
Yeah.
No, sorry. Thank you for bringing attention to this. Thank you for bringing it to our club. Segueing from the politics of it, I was wondering if you had any thoughts or opinions on this in academia. Sorry. It seems very similar to DEI, what you're saying, your AAA. And in colleges, we had ADA, we had Title IX, and then there was significant political backlash to DEI. I was wondering if you had any knowledge about what could have been done better to insulate it from political sabotage, or any hope perhaps for the future, particularly because autism usually is diagnosed more heavily for white males who have an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, so, you know, you're bringing up a whole basket of things there. But let's take, first of all, let's just talk about autism in college. For sure, there are many undiagnosed women and people of color. And, you know, it's like anything, any marginalized group you're in is going to make it harder to get access to the resources that will give you a diagnosis. With women and girls in particular, you know, there are some people who believe that they're better at masking their traits than the guys are. My thought is, you know, if you're a dorky white guy who was the first person to solve the Rubik's Cube on national television, and nobody's surprised when you tell them you're autistic. And if you're a girl, that's a lot harder. And so that bias that you're bringing up, I think, is really important. I'm very excited that there's a very popular autistic woman character on The Pit, which is the most popular show, and she's doing a great job. And they're doing a great job writing about that, and she's doing a great job playing that part. So that'll help. The second thing you're bringing up is, you know, whether DEI also includes disabilities. And unfortunately, the initial wave of anti-DEI stuff also included disabilities. And I think the administration's backed off on that a fair amount. But there's a lot of cynicism about, for example, you know, the number of people who are getting a diagnosis and so they can get extra time on their test or whatever it is. Are some people gaming the system? Sure, probably. Like I said, we should just give tests that everybody can do, regardless, you know, in any amount of time. But it might be a while before we get that. And that means that there's a backlash among some people who think that the system is being gamed. I'm confident that the number of people who are gaming the system is smaller than the number of people who aren't getting the services that they deserve. And again, I think the more, as far as autism is concerned, I think the more, you know, prominent autistic people that we have disclosing their diagnosis and accomplishing things, that will help with that. But as far as some of the other disabilities are concerned, there's still a lot of ableism around all of that that can be weaponized, just like we've seen with other things in DEI. But I think the whole envelope of things has been exacerbated by those of us who are for this stuff, who have been to Stride in the past about how if you don't understand this, there's something wrong with you. And again, we may believe that's true, but it's not a very smart political tactic. And I think academia and the left in general has overplayed its hand politically on this topic. Not that it's not justified, but that it's going to take winning people back and telling somebody there's something, the criticisms that come with that. Again, not the politicians, but the individual people. I think we have to rethink how we do that. Last question, okay?
Do you think there are more people on the spectrum now, or it's just being diagnosed more often? And if there is more of it, why?
Yeah, great question. So for sure, there's more people being diagnosed. And nearly all of the increase is among people who have lower support needs. There's a very modest increase, perhaps, in the people who have profound autism or high support needs. There's a huge scientific debate over whether there's any increase at all or whether there's some, but if there is, it's very modest. There's a huge increase among people like me, and people with more challenges than I have, but mostly those who don't have an intellectual disability. And I would say that's a factor of several things. One is for sure more diagnosis. The second is that I think the criteria have been changed. So when, we used to have Asperger's, autism, and something in the middle called PDD-NOS, which stood for pervasive developmental disability not otherwise specified. It was basically autism, it was Asperger's with a speech delay. So somebody would have had an Asperger's diagnosis, but they didn't speak till they were 4 or 5 years old, and they would have been in the PDD-NOS category. And interestingly, we now know that if you sequence everybody's genomes, they do kind of fall into these 3 clusters. But the decision was made about 12 or 13 years ago to merge it all into one spectrum. And the argument for doing that was if you had more people who were doing things in the world saying they were autistic, that would lower stigma for everybody. And the argument against it would be that, the ones we've already talked about, where people with the highest needs might not get as much attention as they deserve. For now, we're stuck with, we have the one spectrum, and if we divided it again, people would still argue. So I'm kind of in favor of just leaving it, because if you divide it again, then you're going to have the same argument we had before when we put it back together. But the consequence of that is that the low support needs and just kind of got blurred out. So more and more people are saying, this person's on the spectrum who wouldn't have been diagnosed before. I think the third thing is something I've alluded to earlier, which is there are a lot of people who are being, I think the world is a lot tougher than it was, certainly for me. I had to go outside and run around whether I wanted to or not. There was nothing else to do. I think technology and the political environment and all of that has made it a lot harder for young people. And we know for sure that if you have 2 people with the same profile and one has more trauma in their life, then they will end up with a worse outcome, because the trauma is not good to begin with, but the autism is going to make it a whole lot worse, because there's more anxiety and there's you know, autistic people, we have very, very, I wish we didn't, very strong memories. And it's really, really hard for us to rewrite our memories. Boy, my wife, you know, she can forget every traumatic thing that ever happened to her. It's such an unbelievable gift. And a lot of us don't have that, and so that's creating more people who might end up getting a diagnosis. So to me, that's enough to account for the change, but that's going to be debated in the political discourse for the foreseeable future. I mean, even when RFK is gone, this has been percolating for so long that I don't see it going away anytime soon. And it's unfortunate.
Wow. Well, it's good to see that. Yeah. Hear that.